Hi everyone, this is the first lecture of several that I'll be providing for you throughout the semester here that goes over important class material. The PowerPoints are loaded up on the same module that you can access these presentations from, so you can follow along there. The material is also covered in your Landrum book, which is a really important book to be reading, and it outlines the readings for you on the syllabus and in the modules and things like that. So I'm in this awesome media lab room in Fort Hays State University's library. It's new this year. And this monitor will have the PowerPoint on it, as you can see. Pretty big font, so you might be able to see it and kind of follow along a little bit anyway. But so today we're going to be going over what we're doing in this class, why we're here, what scientific writing is, and starting to develop our thesis statements. So let's dive right in. So why are we doing this course? Well, we're doing this course because writing is a really important piece of developing your academic skills, and I talk about in the introduction video to this course that almost no matter what field you're in, you'll probably be doing some sort of writing. Being able to write clearly and communicate well is so important. And this course really focuses on scientific writing and scientific research just as much as writing. So our department really realized that there's a need for this. And writing in psychology in particular is a little bit different from other fields, so we wanted to highlight that a little bit too. One of the main differences in psychology is that psychology is a little bit more cautious in the statements that it makes. There are very few truths in psychology, so one thing I'll encourage you to do in your writing is to not use the word proof or this proves this or that, because we don't really ever prove anything in psychology. We demonstrate evidence for something, but it's hard to make a blanket statement like violent video games cause aggression in children. There are probably other factors that contribute to that. And what you're going to find in the topics that you study throughout the semester, or the topic you study throughout the semester, is that in almost all the topics, there's just a lot of gray area. There's not one definite side or the other. Well, another thing that I'm going to be talking about throughout this presentation and some others is trying to avoid blog style writing. So some of you may have experience with writing for newspapers or writing a blog of some sort or a journal of some sort, but here we're looking for a little bit more formal writing, a little bit more clear in some ways, a little bit more professional. And again, I think that will really aid you in different fields that you guys may be entering. And I'll harp on this throughout the presentation here, but good writing skills take time. They really do. Good writing skills take time to develop. The more you write, the better you get at it. It's just like anything else. It can be hard because we're not used to practicing something like writing when we're at this age, but trust me, you still have time. The more that you practice it, the better you get at it. So, what is good scientific writing? These are a couple quotes from a couple professors that I had in my undergraduate education at the University of Maine at Farmington, who I adored. Dr. Steve Quackenbush told me that when you are reading it, you should feel like you are reading nothing. When you're reading a paper, a scientific paper, you should feel like you're reading nothing. What does that mean? It means similar to if you were reading a really good story. So think about one of your favorite books right now, maybe. The example that I usually use is a Harry Potter book. If you're reading a Harry Potter book, you're just reading, right? It's almost like you're reading nothing. It's so smooth, it's just going and going and going and going, because the writing is really smooth and really manicured. So just, it feels like you're reading nothing. A second quote from Dr. Elliot Welch that has really stuck with me throughout the years is, never become too pleased with a sentence of yours. And what that essentially means is it's easy to write a paper and kind of set it and forget it, but what I'm going to really encourage you guys to do in this class is to work at really revamping your writing, not becoming too pleased with what you write, and being willing to improve it. That doesn't mean to fixate on sentences and spend hours on them, but if something doesn't sound quite right, being willing to revamp it. And of course, being honest with yourself and your level of diligence. We all know, do you take the extra time to reread your paper one more time? Do you take the extra time to find that extra fact to support something that you're trying to say? Do you take that extra time to find that extra source? That level of diligence and discipline really makes a difference in writing over the long haul, and it becomes easier with time when it becomes kind of second nature for you. So we have some different types of writing in psychology. In this class, we're going to be focusing on what's called a literature review. Literature review just means it's a review of the research that's already out there. So in this class, we're not going to be creating our own research and our own experiments. We're just going to be reviewing research that's already published out there, putting it into a paper, collecting it, putting it into a paper, synthesizing it. So another term for literature review can be loosely termed as kind of a classic term paper. So you have done literature reviews probably for other classes already. When you're asked to study something in some class and have citations and research articles, that's a literature review. You're not doing your own research, but you're reviewing what's already out there. And again, that's what we're doing in this class. You will choose a topic and you'll study it. Then we have a research paper. A research paper actually poses a research question of some sort, and it follows through with executing an experiment and drawing conclusions based on that experiment. So a research paper is what you guys will be reading to then summarize in your own papers. So two different types of writing in psychology, and this applies for a lot of different fields too. I wish I could ask you guys for questions that you might have. I'm used to taking questions, but that's not the case here. So it'd be cool to do like a live presentation where, like a Twitter feed with questions coming in. So next we have a segment on writing for your reader. And this is reviewed in your Landrum book, Sternberg 2005. Sternberg is actually a really big psychologist in the field. He's done a lot of work in intelligence and things like that. If you've taken general psychology, you've almost certainly read about his work in intelligence and other things too. He's big into love as well. Cool guy. But these are 4 recommendations he has for writing for your reader and communicating well in writing. A couple of these I think are really relevant to our goals in this class. First is using appropriate vocabulary. What does that mean? That doesn't mean use fancy vocabulary. What that means is actually writing clearly and writing plainly. So in APA writing, we aren't looking to use jargon-filled fancy vocabulary to try to impress people with a big vocabulary. We actually want to write plainly and clearly. Those are the 2 goals there. The next couple that he has, pretty important as well. We talked about maintaining appropriate level of formality a bit. This third one I see a lot in this class. You only want to include details that you need your reader to know. Some of you will probably get feedback on your first drafts for this class saying, hey, I really want you to go through all your paragraphs and I want you to think about what message you're sending to your reader, and do you do that with the sentences and the paragraphs that you use? A lot of times people will add in a lot of extraneous information. So for instance, they might talk about the participants in a study, or where the study was done, or the demographics of the participants, or other sorts of things that really aren't relevant for your reader to know. We want to know the conclusions of of the research you reviewed, what it means, why it's important. Sometimes we have to know those details that I went over. Sometimes those are important. But sometimes students think that they have to summarize everything in a research article where you just don't have to. You also want to avoid abbreviations for the most part. If you're using an abbreviation a lot, like the APA, you spell it out once, American Psychological Association, and then you can use just the abbreviation APA thereafter. But you always want to spell out abbreviations the first time you use them. Okay. Why does APA formatting exist? I thought this was important for us to talk about briefly, because I like to think about, why is something here? Why do we even care about APA format? Why do we care about this formatting of scientific writing? We care about it for these two main reasons here. It really provides a common language for us to communicate, for multiple fields to communicate, because multiple fields use APA formatting because it's good. And it provides a foundation for scientific objectivity. It's really nice once you get APA formatting down, because then no matter what research paper you read, for the most part, you're going to understand how to navigate through it. You're going to know how to pin down sources that they cite. You're going to know where to go to find the hypothesis of the experiment. You're going to know where to go to find the conclusions. You're going to know how to kind of break down a research paper. I kind of just had the thought of, it's almost kind of like, and I wish I knew how to do this, but I don't. But it's almost kind of like, if you were hunting and I'm watching a mountain men show right now on the History Channel. It's fantastic. But if you shoot a deer and then you have to break down the deer in the field so you can bring it back to your house, that's an art. To skin the deer, to break it down, so you can use it. It's kind of like what we're doing here. How can you kind of dissect a paper so you can understand it and get it and do something important with it? All right, selecting a topic. So in this class, made it pretty easy for you guys. We have a book, the Slife book, Clashing Views on Psychological Issues, I think it's called, that outline the topics to choose from for this course. So for this course, you will choose your top 3. You're going to email me your top 3. I review this in other areas of the course, and then you will have one of your top 3 choices, most likely your top choice. So it helps a little bit because the topic is provided for you. You get to choose, but they're all topics that have a lot of research on them. There's a lot of stuff out there on them, and they're interesting topics. So we do that here in this kind of introduction class because it can be really hard to form your own topic. So common mistakes that people make when they form their own topic is that it's too broad. So I've had some people early when I started teaching this class about 5 years ago want to do their own topics, and I let some of them do that, but their topics ended up being way too broad, way too much, and in the end it didn't come together for them. So for instance, studying something like depression in adolescence or childhood trauma or something like that, those are huge topics. I mean, what are you going to write about? There's a huge ocean of literature out there, and I mean, the topics that you can choose from this course are pretty specific. They're defined. You can find research on them. They're interesting. They're a great way to get acquainted with something interesting in the field, but also writing in a scientific way. I do allow people, there's usually about 1 student or so per semester that wants to write on their own topic. You have to talk about that with me, and I'm just going to be honest with you about it, as to whether I think it's viable or not. You also really need to feel comfortable with researching and writing already. So if you're a novice at scientific writing or research, I highly discourage you to do this, because I don't want to get in a situation where the end of the semester comes and you just feel really, really bad about your topic and it's not really going anywhere. So if you're, in some sort of experimental class and you have to pick your own topic, there are different ways to do that, and they talk about that in the book as well. So I won't go over all of these, but obviously you can A lot of great research is sprung from personal observations. Someone observes something interesting in the world and they say, hey, I'm going to go study that. I'm reading a book about a woman who worked in a crematory right now. Her name is Caitlin Doherty, and she worked in the crematory for a year as like a 23-year-old, and had some really interesting experiences, and she wrote a really beautiful book about death in our culture, and how we go about death ritual. So lots of interesting observations she had. So another way to come up with, so she might have some cool research stuff that she could possibly do, but another way to come up with your own research is to do vicarious observation. So I may think about something cool that Caitlin saw in the crematory, and I say, hey, I'm going to do a research project on that. So I didn't see it, but I'm doing a vicarious observation where seeing something that she observed. Exploring a practical problem. There's an issue. We do research to try to take care of a challenge in the world. And of course, you could expand on previous ideas or challenge previous ideas. So these are not what we're doing in this class per se. Again, just if you're doing your own research somewhere along the line. Okay, last part for this first lecture here. Developing the thesis statement. A really important part of your outline, I was trying to think of the exact assignment where this comes up, is going to be developing your thesis statement. A thesis statement is meant to be the foundation or focus for your paper. Meant to be the foundation or focus for your paper. So everything in your paper should really flow from your main thesis. Your book talks about, the Landrum book is what I'm referring to. Your book talks about what thesis statements should be. They have some great examples in there, but it's essentially an assertion. It's a main point in your paper, and it should be pretty specific, and it should be pretty much one sentence. So I provided what I think is a good thesis down here for a topic that I'm interested in. Strong evidence exists that therapists should focus on the nature of the therapeutic relationship as a predictor in treatment outcomes, more so than the type of therapy employed. So what I'm essentially saying here is that the therapeutic relationship is more important than the type of therapy, like cognitive behavioral therapy or dialectical behavior therapy. Then it's more important than the type of therapy employed, that therapeutic relationship. And there is evidence to support this, so it's not like my original idea or whatever. I'm just coming up with a thesis that is based on that research. So in this thesis statement here, it's a strong assertion. It's the main point of a paper. You could tell that I could create a whole paper that supports this idea that the therapeutic relationship is stronger than the type of therapy a therapist uses. And it's specific and it's one sentence. It's crisp, it's good. I'm going to be looking for you guys to have a strong thesis statement to be a foundation for your paper. So I think that is the end of this first part here. Our next lecture is going to be on research and references, and we'll get to that here, I think, either next module or one of the next modules here.